They're living a life where they're absolutely drowning in content. They're drowning in knowledge. They now have access to all knowledge in the world if they want to go and get it. So knowledge in the content of words and stories, not the way a story's told, but the content of a story, is killing your customers. It's killing them. Their days are full of scrolling complete and utter nonsense. Their brains are fried. So why would you want to then load your tour? You got to remember, this person maybe only taking a tour once a year, twice a year if you're lucky, or the industry's lucky. So if your customer's got a fried brain with content and nonsense, why would you design a tour to fill their brain with even more content and probably some nonsense versus filling their brain with emotional reaction and filling their soul with emotional reaction? I would be designing on the emotional side way more than I'm designing on the content knowledge side.
Peter, Syme, you and I love tour design. Tour design is obviously the core part of what we're doing as tour operators, but there's a way in which tour design is about making sure you don't build a business that can evaporate overnight. There's walking tour businesses we see all the time where they wrote a perfect script and they had a tour guide suddenly take that and go, poof, I'm going to recreate your business and I'm going to do it overnight. I'm going to become my own guide, my own business. And you've just lost something there. So I really want to focus on us thinking about how tour design is really a way to build a defensive moat around your business, how to design in ways to make sure that you're able to defend against new business in the industry, against thieves, and also against the future, against AI and technology. So is that framing correct to you? Do you think about it in a similar way as kind of a defensive moat?
I would like to get the emphasis over to the tour operators, whether they're new tour operators or experienced tour operators. Tour design is the fundamental foundations that your business is built on. So you wouldn't build a house with rubbish foundations. If you're going to build a tour business, you need good foundations. And the tour design, not the tour, not what it is, but the design of the tour is the foundations. The actual what the tour is, all of these thousands of different experiences we have are not actually as important as what the design of the tour is, because the actual product you can redesign in so many different ways, good or bad. It's the fundamental principles of understanding how to design a tour, not just to delight the customers, because that's the first principle. You have to design a tour to delight the customers, otherwise you're not going to get value going to the customers, and you're not going to get the reviews you need, etc., etc. But designing a tour in a way that protects your business, protects your IP, allows you to iterate on that design going forward and build a bigger set of houses than just one house of tours.
The word that stands out first is iterate. I think design thinking, as it's applied to anything in the world, is a whole category of thought. Design thinking is all about iteration. It means you're never finished designing. And what you're doing is taking what you have, creating feedback loops, getting assessments from your guides, from the locals, from your guests, and using that information to say, well, what if we tinker with this? What if we change this? What if we adjust the tour length? There's this mantra in the industry that a walking tour has to be 3 hours or 2 hours long. It might be 60 minutes because it works in your customer's persona. It's an early morning tour before they get started with the day, whatever it might be. Iteration needs to be at the core of what you're doing. Your tour is never finished.
So customers today are different from customers 10 years ago, and they're different from customers 20 years ago. People's lives are changing. They've been exposed to so much content. They've been exposed to so much experiences on a daily basis in their life. So when they drop into our world of tourism and experiences, they may have been here before, they may not have been here before. What you try to create is something that stands out for the customer more than not just their daily life experience, but if they have had a tour before, even if it's not a tour in your niche, they have got one reference point. And you want your reference point that they're about to get to exceed that experience, because they're going to remember the previous one. And what you want them to be saying is, oh, this tour we've just done was way better than that last one. So the whole design process is about how do I release excitement, knowledge, fear, all of these touch points of emotions in the client and the client's persona at certain points. There is some rules based around that you know way better than me from your design expertise, like peaks and troughs all the way through the tour. But you're really playing on the emotional heartstrings of the customer here. You're paying a guide, or you are the guide. Therefore, you have this opportunity of human-to-human contact. That is unique in a lot of tourism these days because we're more and more getting disconnected from people, spending more time on screens. So you need to double down on the emotional part of it, the human connecting part of it, and design to release these feelings in people that they don't release on a daily day.
Yeah, there's a few words going on here that are key. Emotion and connection. Let's start with emotion. For me, emotion is really a choice that you make as to what kinds of building blocks you're using to think about the experience that you're designing. And to me, there's two different versions of building blocks. One is information and one is emotion. If your building block is information, then you're looking at all of your different walking tour stops, your food stops, your hikes or whatever, and you're saying, what does my guest want to know here? An incredible old tobacco factory right now that has been completely gutted and turned into an urban park. And so on a certain level, like I'm telling you, this is now called St. Anne's Warehouse. The old warehouse used to be a tobacco factory. Dates from the middle 1800s. It's blah, 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 blah. It's classic tour guiding. And it relies on the idea that a guest doesn't know a lot. Part of the problem today is that a guest does know a lot, or at least they have the potential to know a lot. They have a potential to open up ChatGPT and have a very casual conversation with access to your phone's camera, and suddenly you can say, suddenly it's going to tell you, this is St. Anne's Warehouse and everything about that. Those information giving days where that paradigm needs to be, for me, planted by an emotional paradigm, which means you begin by asking yourself, what do I want my guests to feel here? And you mentioned fear. That's one of the core human emotions. I wouldn't recommend painting too much with fear, but sometimes, I know you also as a multi-day operator relied on a lot of those zesty emotions, but the one emotion, for example, that I think of a lot and I use more fundamentally in my design work than anything else is surprise. Paul Eklund, a very famed psychologist from 50 years ago, came up with what were the core 6 human emotions, and fear is one of them. Why? Because on the African savannah, if there was a tiger over there in the woods, then you need to know it and run. That's why we're so prone to noticing danger and negativity and reacting to it immediately. So fear's one, but another core emotion, actually one of the only positive core emotions, is surprise. It's the sense of feeling, whoa, I didn't see that coming. So if I were designing a tour around this space right now, the first thing I would do is say, how do I get my guests to feel something surprising about this? And it's surprising that it's a gutted urban oasis. So I'm asking myself, where should I tell my story? Where should I position my guests to build up a sense of anticipation that maybe gets them to think that we're going to be going somewhere else than we are? And then when we get here, it's like, oh, I didn't see that coming. So you as the tour operator are trying to build an experience around thinking about a human emotion. And the beautiful thing about that is those emotions are universal, and there's actually hundreds of them. Another man named Syme came up with what he calls the universal human emotions. He didn't come up with them, but he just listed dozens and dozens and dozens of them. And it's everything from joy and surprise and ecstasy and erotic desire. But these are the things we want out of an experience and out of our lives.
The thing I'd like to get across to the tour operators here is put yourself in your customer's shoes today. They're living a life where they're absolutely drowning in content. They're drowning in knowledge. They now have access to all knowledge in the world if they want to go and get it. So knowledge in the content of words and stories, not the way a story's told, but the content of a story, is killing your customers. It's killing them. Their days are full of scrolling complete and utter nonsense. Their brains are fried. So why would you want to then load your tour? You got to remember, this person's maybe only taking a tour once a year, twice a year if you're lucky, or the industry's lucky. So if your customer's got a fried brain with content and nonsense, why would you design a tour to fill their brain with even more content and probably some nonsense versus filling their brain with emotional reaction and filling their soul with emotional reaction? I would be designing on the emotional side way more than I'm designing on the content knowledge side. Obviously, there has to be a balance and there has to be X number of knowledge, especially if it's a new place and the person's never been, etc., etc. But the trigger factors, that they're going to remember you for are not the sentence that you told them a piece of information on. It's how you made them feel, which is emotional. And people are a bit emotionally messed up these days, or maybe I'm just old, but they're a bit emotionally light. They don't know, they're not in control of their emotions anymore. They don't know good emotions versus bad emotions, or they're too emotional, etc. But we have to design for emotions more than the actual content to create. You want an experience that's going to leave the people in awe. And I don't know if awe is one of the 6 rules. What is awe? We could argue what is awe. Awe is, to me, is where your jaw drops. You're in awe of a certain landscape. You're in awe of a certain place you've visited or a certain person you've met. You're in awe of something. You're really in an emotional state of, my God, what the hell is that I'm looking at, or hearing, or smelling, or feeling. In a state of awe. And that's where you're designing an emotional experience to get your clients into a state of awe.
We have a fantastic Tourpreneur podcast in which I interviewed probably the preeminent psychologist of awe, Dr. Keltner. And it's true, a lot of his examples, they end up becoming about what might classically be called spiritual experiences. A moment of looking at the ocean and saying, I'm so small. The moment of looking at a loved one knowing that they're on their deathbed. These moments that are really about transcending our day-to-day ways of being human. What does that mean to be a tour operator? That doesn't mean that like every single moment of your tour needs to be this like moment of saying, oh my God, who am I? I'm so small, I'm insignificant. What is meaning? What is death? What is life? No, but a moment of that. To me, it's about emotional range. You think of a good movie, you watch a movie like Titanic, right? That's probably the movie I remember from being a kid. But what I remember is I laughed, I cried, I was afraid, I was anticipating. There were all of these things, and not everything was just a single one note, right? You know, I think about ghost tours, I think about architecture tours, I think about the nicheification of our industry, and I think it does our industry a little bit of a disservice because it means we paint with one certain kind of color throughout a tour. And now this is a building from the Renaissance, and now this is a building that's brutalist, and now this is what? We're an architecture tour. People want to hear about architecture. How do you make that come alive? And to make it come alive, it's got to have variety. It's got to have those moments of poignancy, moments of lightness, moments of transcendence, and moments of laughter, whatever it might be.
So when you're designing, again, what is the split between emotional and information-based? This comes back to what you'll hear us repeating and repeating and repeating time again. Who is your customer? Because the same amount of emotion is not going to be designed into every single experience from different tour operators. It depends on what this experience is and who that customer is going on it. Some types of tours and experiences lead towards more emotional connection and more awe moments than other types. And that does make one right and the other wrong. What makes it right and wrong is really, really understanding who your customer is, really understanding what they expect to see on this experience in this tour, really understanding what they expect to feel or they think they're going to feel in this tour, then going beyond that and giving the surprise thing that you talked about with a whole dose of emotion on the back of it. Now, for one tour operator, that might be done at this level, and for another tour operator, that might be done at this level. So how do tour operators think about this? Because I know it can be confusing, particularly if you've never done it before. And I know I'm always saying build for your customer, not build for yourself. But think about your own life. Doesn't matter whether you're 20, 25, 30, 40. Doesn't matter where you are. You've had unique experiences in your life, and you're the only person in the world that's had those experiences. You are unique. You've had unique experiences. Think about the experiences that you can remember like that. The ones that either inspired you so much, changed you so much. It might have been a teacher at school with something, how they looked after you, trained you. It might have been your parents, for good or bad. It might have been friends at school, for good or bad. It might have been your first travel experience. It might have been your first sporting event. We've all got these unique experiences that are transformational in our life because you can reference them in your head. I'm nearly 60 and I can reference things in my head from my teenage years instantly because they were emotional and challenging experiences. So that gives you a grounding. That's what I can remember. So how am I then going to design these in for this persona of customer who may be very different from you, but that's what I'm trying to achieve for the customer.
Yeah. Another word that you said that I think about a lot is this word connection. And it's connected to emotion because we feel connection through emotion. But connection is also, for me, It's a three-way triangle. There's a lot of connections that happen on a great tour. There's the guide, there's the guests, and there's the place where you're at. And I think always that the more you have arrows pointing to all of these sides, the better. You as a guide, whether it's 3 hours or 30 days on a tour, you need to make a connection with your guests. That means asking them questions, getting to know them beyond where you're from, making sure there's a certain facilitation of dialogue that allows them to share. People get afraid of the idea of guest sharing, but if you facilitate it, if you know the questions you're asking and what you're trying to get out of them in a structured way, then it becomes really powerful because they feel part of the tour and the conversation. But not the whole part, but that's one of the arrows of one of the sides of the triangle. Guide to guest. They also need to feel connected to you just through the power of your storytelling, through your warmth, through your ability to not seem weird in front of them, unless that's what your tour is about. So guide and guest. Guest and place. It can't only be about the guide. It can't just be the most entertaining experience they ever had of watching someone. Again, that's exciting, but it's ultimately empty because the uniqueness and the value of what we're doing as place-based storytellers is there's a freaking place. The number of times in which I've taken tours, and I take thousands of tours, probably take over 100 tours a year easily, and I've taken thousands in my life, different kinds of guides. And a lot of experiences I've had have been guides taking me away from the place by just telling me the history. And the more I'm sitting there focused on them and listening to them, the more I'm growing further and further away from the tangible, tactile sense of where I am. Whether it means where I'm pointing to, what I'm feeling, what I'm seeing, these bricks, that visual sense of where I am needs to be deepened between the guests. And then the guests need to be connected to each other. You also, as the guide, need to be connected to the place. Your guides can't simply, if you're an operator that's hiring guides, they can't simply be memorizing the script. If they're memorizing the script, then their sense of place is empty after that script, right? And you know that. I know if you just told me everything that you memorized about a place or about this topic, you know when you could tell somebody could go on for another 3 days about something. And that's intangible, but it's sensed. And it means that your guides need to have a way of connecting to their place that empowers them to do more research, empowers you to share, for example, a collected database of what everybody knows. But it needs to be a rich, embodied experience using all of those different sides of what I call the connection triangle.
One of the things you mentioned on that connection triangle that I don't see getting used well, and I see it used better than in multi-day tours than I do in day tours, but it's absolutely suitable for day tours, even short day tours, even if it's only that 1 hour day tour, is that communication between guests and guests. I do not see that happening in a lot of tours because the guide does not create the space for that to happen. And this is not complex, this is difficult. If you've got 10 guests in the morning, you've only got a 1 hour tour, it takes 2 minutes to get them in a circle and just ask each one in turn, what do you expect to get out of this tour, of this experience? What are you looking for? And within 2 minutes, you've got all of this information as a guide. So no matter what you know and how you've run that tour 50 times before, that tour should be different for that group because you've just had 10 people telling you what they expect to get out of it. So straight away, you've got a framework you have to deliver to because that's going to be a tick in the box. But then you're thinking instantly, right, how do I exceed that? But then instantly there's a network of communication between the different guests there because they've all listened to each other and they've all been surprised with some of the things that's been out of each other. And the thing that will surprise them the most, if you've got 10 people and they've all booked the same tour, they've probably all got 10 different expectations.
So you've got that situation where you're asking a guest a question. A lot of it comes down to thinking about your question as something you prepare and reflect on just as much as the content that you research. There are so many throwaway icebreakers that I see, where are you from? But I'm going to experiment very quickly right here. Pete, can you tell me a memory from your childhood based on food?
Based on
Food.
food. Bland food. Scottish basic bland food. Fresh, from the land. Killing. As I got a bit older, I had to go kill my food. I learned to fish at a very, very young age and bring the fish back, and we would eat the fish.
Okay, I regret asking that question. How emotional was that? How emotional was this moment here where you have guests gathered from the Netherlands, from the UK, from Singapore, from whatever, South America, and they're all standing around and they've just heard about this guy, this crazy man from up north, killing fish and the bland food. And what's happening in the minds of everybody is they're relating on an emotional level to what they had for breakfast and also how funny this is. It's funny to me because I grew up in the middle of Wisconsin where killing for breakfast was going to the grocery store and accidentally knocking over a bowl of, a box of Cheerios. I don't know. That's an incredible response. Now imagine your tour where you've got 8 people and they each just take a moment and share what they used to have, to eat as a child. And then you draw that energy, that emotion, those expectations together into your city and say, New York, I couldn't tell you just one story of what we used to eat. That's the power of New York. And today what we're going to do is learn, whatever it is. That's a question that's facilitating dialogue, but it's based around connection. It's based around a sense of bonding. And it's so powerful. So powerful. So designing for questions and facilitation is part of this word connection. What else does connection mean to you?
Connection is a human emotion that we're pack animals. Like, we've been wandering this globe for X thousands of years. We are pack animals. So we are humanly wanting to be with other people, understand other people, experience other people. But we're going through a period in evolution where we seem to be designing and developing technology that keeps people separate, makes people lonely. Even in big cities with 10 million people living in them, seem to be more lonely people than in tiny little places like where I live, which to me is a disconnect on there. But then that makes the desire for connection in human beings is even more now because of the life we're living. Therefore, if you understand that as a tour operator, and you understand again, back to the persona, who are these people? Are all my guests coming from big cities, big 10 million people, 20 million people city? Are they couples? Are they families? They're not so worried about connection. Are they solo travellers? If they're solo travellers, they are worried about connection. They're concerned both from an opportunity point of view and both from a threat point of view. And they see travel as 100% a reason to connect with other people. So again, it's this appreciating who your customers are and then building the opportunity in their experience to deliver that connection at multiple different levels. Remember, there's also the opportunity after the tour as well, not just on the tour. Every operator wants a review. You're going to have a system designed to create the review. But is there another system where you can maintain the connections that were developed to take it to another level? As you were having a chat, you found out that 6 of the 10 in your group are actually in destination for 4 days. The other 4 are leaving tomorrow. So there's an opportunity straight away for, if they all get on, they all have a great time, is there an opportunity to meet up and have a beer later on or a coffee later on? You've got to be able to pick up on these things and manage the connection flow because the guests will love you for doing it.
So these are different levels of flow in a tour. So you have the itinerary flow. Am I on time? Am I making my vendor appointments? Am I am I finishing on time? Am I starting on time? Whatever. The kind of just general pacing of a tour. That's the tour flow. And then you have the emotion flow. The emotion flow for me is about what is my guest feeling at every moment of the time. And it might be tired, it might be excited, it might be whatever, but then it's also going deeper and deeper into those emotions or more powerful into the emotions until you get to the peak emotion. And that peak moment, or that peak emotion is like a moment roughly, generally, hopefully 2/3 or so down the road of the tour. That is the moment that even if everything else goes wrong, they're going to remember, and they're going to remember the tour by ultimately at the end of the tour. The peak moment, the end moment, and I also think the beginning of the moment of the tour. These are what we talk about when we talk about the psychological principle of the peak end rule. The peak end rule was kind of systematized or theorized by Daniel Kahneman, but also a lot of other psychologists that replicated it and added to it. A lot of design theorists think about it. And really, it's a very simple concept. The concept is our brains are not primed to remember everything. We don't remember almost anything. In fact, we are forgetting machines. Our brains spend a lot of time just chucking things out because it doesn't matter to them. What does matter are the memories that bond. A bonded memory is a memory that tries to connect with emotion, with who we are. So for example, I can remember nothing about where you went to school or the street that you live on, even though I've been to your house, but I do now will always probably remember that you used to kill fish as a child. And it's because that surprised me. My brain did something with that I think it's going to cement that in a way that other things are going to pass through. So that designing for that peak experience is a way to alleviate the pressure of thinking everything on the tour needs to be magical and incredible. In fact, it shouldn't be. A lot of the tour should be not mediocre, but normal in order to make that peak stand out.
Yeah, jump out. So tour operators will be thinking, why is all of this really important? And there's the obvious, you're going to get happy guests and you're going to get better reviews. But the really, really strong reason why this is important is the better designed your tour, the higher the price you're going to be able to charge for it.
Yeah.
And you're going to be looking at a competitive landscape with many other tour operators, particularly in many destinations, maybe offering similar tours. And you're going to have to justify why you're charging more. And you want to be charging more. You don't want to be the cheapest in the industry unless you're playing a volume game. You want to be the highest price in your industry with the highest margins in your sector. But customers are going to want to know why. And customers will want to know, why are you more expensive than this other thing that looks similar? This is why this design and this designing of concept of tour with continuous iteration is so important. Because as you get feedback from customers over the years, you may be able to design up again. You may be able to actually increase prices again, whereas the competitive pressure of the market and of society may be pushing down to get prices cheaper, but the feedback and the effort you're putting into design with your customers, because you're getting feedback off them, you may be able to iterate up the way, hopefully with gain the experience you can, and justify a higher price, which means a higher margin, which means more profit, and that's what we're here to do, help operators make more profit.
Yeah, so this gets to what we talk about in terms of value-based pricing. The idea that what the customer is paying for is not directly linked to the costs, but linked to the feeling, the sense of value that they're placing on the experience. And most of that, if you're doing your job well, isn't linked to a cost item for you. And to me, I think of it this way. You might have a Michelin star restaurant that is costing you $100 per tasting, and you think that's going to be the big wow. I think there's a way in which there's a version that might cost $50 at a less good restaurant, but the owner comes out and shares their story of what it's like to be the first, female restaurant owner in the city, or to achieve kind of success or whatever it might be. A story. Attaching a story to a lower cost item, the connection with a human. That's incredible, because that's a story that then the guest can go home and say, you know what? We went into this magical restaurant. I didn't see it coming. And we met the chef. She had an incredible story that sticks in your head. It's really easy to just be like, all right, well, we expected we were going to go to this Michelin star restaurant. We did it. It was delicious. Now let's move on. For me, I learned this lesson with my brother-in-law, who is insanely wealthy. He works in finance, and he travels the world. He's a nice guy, but he travels the world going to the Four Seasons wherever he goes and eating at 2 or 3 Michelin star restaurants for every single meal. And I watch him. I've been to these meals with him, and he just looks bored. Even if it's the best meal possible, it's what he's used to. And so if you're riding at that emotional level, that level of expectation, how do you exceed it, right? And how do you add value if you're just stretched with your cost being all applied to the best? That's not going to win you over customers that are going to go home and rave about you. All you're doing at that level is meeting their expectation. To design for value, to design in a way that surprises them and exceeds your expectations, you need to rethink the value that you're bringing to a component. And it's often not linked to how much you're spending.
Yeah, so just using the food, I'll give you examples from my background using the food thing. So we would, multi-day, that's not day tours. We would obviously have restaurants booked in or places to eat, let's say places to eat several times. And sometimes depending on who the clients were, because we were selling to different personas. If it was corporate clients and exec teams, the restaurants would definitely be in there and they have a certain expectation to reference. And I used to put a restaurant name in that didn't exist because I was making it up. And the restaurant would be on the top of a mountain, we'd take them up a mountain. It wasn't a restaurant, it was a bonfire. The bonfire had a chef and they got a barbecue. But the difference was the sunset was stunning. And then there was base jumpers jumping off the other mountains. So they're standing there having a barbecue, being served by getting gins and tonics, great chef, watching base jumpers jumping off a mountain. Do they remember that, or do they remember another restaurant that they go to every week because they're execs in corporate world? I know which one they remember. And it was not part of it wasn't part of our tour as what we provide. It wasn't, we were an adventure tour operator. Okay? We're doing adventurous stuff with them. You're designing around the peripheries of your core experience. Your core experiences was rivers and mountains, scary stuff. but you're designing around your core experiences to again take the level up. Hopefully you've been exceeding on your core experience, but you can also exceed outside your core experience. Often they exceed outside your core experience, sometimes beyond your core experience, depending who the clients are.
So you're designing in order to delight the customer, but also to defend your business. And let's return to this concept of a defensive moat. What kind of defensive moat are we building here? Well, that's really incredibly hard to replicate. You could easily replicate, oh, they went to these 3 restaurants. But if you have a special relationship with an owner, if you know this field where you can have a bonfire and you can have this show up, in other words, what do you have access to that nobody else has access to? And that's usually relationships, access to a certain venue or a certain place. I built my walk-in tour business in New York City off of access, and I was very lazy. I'm a very lazy tour operator because I have never really mastered Google ads or Facebook ads or marketing. I'm too lazy to post every day on social media. So when I built a walk-in, I left a bad breakup in Paris and I moved to New York City, and I spent a little time being a photographer. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to go back to my roots. I'm going to start a walk-in tour business. And I looked around and said, what the hell can I do in New York City, the biggest city on earth, most tourists on earth, if you add up domestic and international? What can I do to like stand out? And by standing out, I wanted to play a completely different game. And the game that I played was basically to create a tour company that was almost like a speakeasy. Speakeasy is a hidden bar famous from Prohibition 100 years ago in the United States when alcohol was illegal. And it was very popular when I moved to New York City, the idea that a speakeasy, you'd go to a speakeasy bar. And so I created a speakeasy tour company. You could only find me if somebody had given you a card or given you the phone number on the card. You had to text me. I had no website, no booking software. You just texted me, and I'd take 10 guests at a very exorbitant rate at that time. And the things that we did were we'd go meet my landlord in the basement of my apartment. We'd go see my apartment. We'd chop meat, probably illegally, at my butcher shop down the street. We'd have champagne on my Greenwich Village rooftop, an authentic Greenwich Village experience, which was basically just my landlord, my butcher, maybe another friend or something, a friend who plays poker in the neighborhood when he was playing poker. Whatever I could scrounge up, I would literally text friends and see what was going on, and that was it. But guess what? No tourist from the middle of America or from Dubai could show up in New York City and do that. There's just no way to do that. And I jacked up the price because people would go home and they'd say, I felt like more than a New Yorker. I felt like I was absorbed in some guy's life all of a sudden. It was almost like they were playing a role. And these tours were euphoric. Most of what I did was illegal and not scalable, but they were euphoric tours. And I never had to worry about a booking. And I could just raise my price as much as I wanted to, and nobody cared. Because people were going home and saying, I don't know, what was the cost? What were the inclusions? They were going, oh my God, you did what? You went where? What?
One of the things that is underutilized, because you're trying to create, even if you can't get access to really special places, it's called the environment, it's called nature. Every single, whether it's inside a city or whether it's outside a city, your job as a tour operator is to find these unique places that you can take people to and create that sense of awe.
Yeah.
And can it be replicated? If somebody copies you and finds it, that you've got the skill then to keep doing that and finding these places, and can then put the framing of the story around it that really surprises the customer. And every single operator, no matter where they're based, big city, small town, rural location, is able to use the environment in that way to create extra value in all moments within their experience.
That's where we get to this idea of like, what skills do you actually have? And it's not you're the best person at researching and digging up information, because frankly, technology might already be beating you, or it might be better than you already. So for example, then your skill or your assets include your perspective. If you, for example, are a first generation Chinese woman whose mother came over and opened up a dumpling shop in order to pay for your college, that perspective and that story is a defensive moat. No audio tour generated by AI or no other individual copying your tour can copy that. They can't copy that without like really being problematic. And your skill becomes understanding the reservoir of who you are from personal experience, from your unique position as a business, as whatever, but then your relationships, but then also your ability to just keep moving forward with creativity. So everything doesn't rely on knowing this hidden spot, because the minute it's discovered, you're screwed. Your skill is fine. I'm 3 steps ahead of you. I've got a list of 10 other places that we're going to go, and I can reroute and change everything on the drop of a dime, because that is going to happen. In the nature of our business, that type of copying or loss of your intellectual property that you think you own, that's going to happen. It's just the nature of the game.
I'll give you an example from the venture travel multi-day space. So if you're in the venture travel multi-day space, trekking up Kilimanjaro and going to Everest Base Camp is absolutely insane. 20 years ago, it wasn't. There wasn't that many people doing it. Each of these destinations takes several 100,000 customers a year, sorry. So you've got several 100,000 people doing exactly the same experience, which is not a day to it. Each of them are 10 days, 12 days, 14 days, 17 days for Everest Base Camp to do it properly. So you've got this oversupply of guests doing exactly the same experience. So if you're a tour operator doing those, you're now in a competitive game with dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of other tour operators doing it. Many of them with significant lower cost models than you. Because if they're local tour operators who are in destination, 100% their cost model is significantly lower than yours. So you're not going to win on price. You just can't win on price. It's impossible. Therefore, if you're going to win, you're going to have to design into that experience extra value to justify, often charging over $1,000 more, sometimes $1,500 more. So this is where, in a really competitive environment, it's really important to be able to design and justify that design. Or you make the decision, because you're getting a bit more experience in that iterating and then creative again, that maybe I should step away from this now because it's so competitive, and I'm going to design in areas that don't have the brand awareness, like Everest Base Camp and Kilimanjaro, who drag people in because of the brand awareness. I just walked past your apartment that is insanely busy outside with people taking Instagram photos.
Very popular.
Very popular for Instagram photographs. So do you want to be in that as a tour operator? Do you want to be there exposing your clients? Or do you take your design skills away and create an experience that's actually better than Kilimanjaro, actually better than Everest Base Camp? You just take your skills and design it elsewhere.
Yep. And you can create a point of differentiation. I mean, if I were designing a tour in my neighborhood here, I would make laughing at all of those tourists part of the experience. In other words, look at all these tour groups who are huddled over, just all taking the same photo. I'd say, in a minute, we're going to walk by what I think of as the most ridiculous situation in my entire neighborhood. Not only because I live right here, but also because I think they don't know what they don't know. They think they're looking at the most fantastic view of New York City possible. And what they don't understand is what the locals know, which is right around the corner, there's something even more special. So we're going to walk by, we're going to wave, take a photo if you have to, but follow me to something special. And now they feel like they have hit the lottery, like that they are with the one person that knows something that's way more special right around the corner. They feel better than, they feel superior than the tourists that are there. They can still get the photo if they need to get the photo, but I'm not making that the big thing versus the meat market of tours that think you just have to go to the must-dos, the must-sees. I used to call it the Trojan horse tour, where you start with some of the things that the guests think they have to see, Times Square, Central Park, and then you go somewhere else. And it's not necessarily what the tour is built on, because it is really hard to sell an actual hidden gems tour that's really off the beaten path, because guests say they want that, but ultimately they do want to see and check the boxes of the most famous things. So I like to design those kinds of hybrids, a Trojan horse, where they're getting into they think it's one thing, and then before they know it, they're in the Bronx. And I don't tell them we're off to the Bronx, and I just treat it like another part of New York. And then suddenly I go, by the way, when we walked over that bridge, we're now in the Bronx, and we've been there for whatever, for the last 30 minutes. And their eyes go, what? I've heard about the Bronx. I never thought in a million years I would be on a tour of the Bronx. I thought you said this was the highlights of New York City. I said, it is, but it's my highlights. And it changes the perception. And that's what you want. You need that type of transformation that moves the needle on their idea of what they thought they were getting that exceeds expectations.
You can also use psychology of the guest. If you really start to understand your customer personas, who they are, if you've got a deep understanding of your customer, which takes several years as a tour operator to get, but if you have a deep understanding of your customer, you can use certain things against them. So I was getting asked every week by dozens of customers to take them up Everest Base Camp Kilimanjaro, and I'd stopped doing it in 2.9 or 2.10 because it was just too busy and I wasn't enjoying it. My guys weren't enjoying it, blah, blah, blah. But then I used to use it in my marketing. Do you want to be one of 150,000 going up at Everest Base Camp? Or do you want to go to this area in Nepal that I can guarantee you'll be one of 20 people to go there this year? So you use that psychology depending if you know your customer. Your customer may be in the profile that they really want to go to Everest Base Camp and it's a tick box. But if the customer is in the profile where they're looking for that thing that is different, unique, special, much less people being exposed to it, you can use these other marketing messages against them. And I used to still match, unlike you, I did a lot of performance marketing, Facebook ads, social, PPC. I'd still use Everest Base Camp in Kilimanjaro even though I wasn't going there.
Yeah.
Because I was getting the eyeballs coming in and then going to use series, and I'd use crap pictures of really bad situations on them and convert the customers into doing something completely different.
Yep. 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 Again, this is about point of differentiation, which is just more and more and more important in kind of the mass consumer, mass tourism landscape that we're in today.
Yep.
This is a way to be a defensive business against the commodification of everything. It's a way to stand out and make sure that people aren't categorizing you. If you're, let's say you're on Get Your Gut, how can this be a tour that is recognizable, but also different enough to justify them not comparing you based on simply cost? It can be done, but it's in the design, from everything from your tour stops to your titles to your photography, in a way that says, there's no way that I can put this in the same box as this. And therefore, I don't mind paying $199 for this, even if this thing is $49 over here, and you might share the same marginal costs.
So, real story, true story from a couple of weeks ago. Mitch, myself, Chris, who's not here this week, but we were all in Berlin. Because we were in Berlin, which is the home of Get Your Guide, we were sitting out at bar looking at Get Your Guide on the computers, looking at tours in Berlin. For obvious reasons, we're thinking about doing some tours in Berlin. We could not differentiate when we were proving up the different types of tours in Berlin. They all came up. They all looked the same. What one was sticking out was the one that had the big discount on it. And that's obviously the one that was maybe getting some traction because they'd whacked a great big discount on it. But that's devaluing, and you don't want to be the operator that's having to discount massively to get the traction on. So we were looking at some boat tours, then we were looking at some walking tours. But it was so hard just from looking at a screen of what one do we pick here just from looking at this. And then if you click on and go a bit deeper, and I clicked on 3, I was reading the same, more or less, same description. So what are you going to put in your content there that differentiates to the customer at that point? Because they're near the booking phase. They may be at the planning phase, but at the booking phase there, you've got to have something that's going to grab. The photography is hugely important.
Huge.
But when I was looking at the river cruises, I was looking at 9 different pictures that looked very, very similar, even them were from 9 different companies. It was a boat on a river, a boat on a river, a boat on a river. So you're going to have to really put a lot of thought into this, much more deeper than maybe years ago. If you want to compete on these aggregator marketplaces, you're going to have to put so much effort into differentiate your media on there, your content on there, and how it's going to grab the eyeball and make the person press the button to book with you rather than the other ones.
I think of Mr. Beast. He's a little discredited right now, so I'm not saying that I'm a big fan. But when I remember reading about how Mr. Beast thinks about social media, about YouTube, I mean, he's the number 1 YouTuber, he's the number 1 influencer in the world. He tests every minute aspect of the thumbnails of his YouTube videos. He tests 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different photos of his face, his position, his hands or whatever, the colors of the background, the sizes of the font, for everything. He keeps iterating on that level to see which thumbnail is getting the most attraction, the most clicks. So that level of intentional detail of just a single thumbnail design should be an indication of the kind of attention you should be paying to that same visual real estate that is your only chance to do storytelling besides your tour description in the in the shopping journey of your customer. And I think probably for me, the key is you need to be prepared to be losing customers. In other words, you need to make sure that it doesn't feel so generic that it's just going to appeal to absolutely everybody. Or it's going to be undifferentiated. You're going to have to slap a discount thing on there, or people are just going to shop based on price or something else. You need to be prepared to stand out, which means you need to be prepared to not look like everybody else and turn some customers down.
And you've got to be brave as well. If you understand your customer persona, you don't want to attract customers that don't fit it, so you're going to have to be brave. maybe I took that to the extreme, but I can remember again performance marketing where I'm paying Facebook quite a lot of money to get my ads mentioned, but I would go anti what other tour operators were doing. So I was watching every other venture tour operator explaining the great parts of the tour, the fantastic feeling you're going to feel, the awe spots, the surprise and all the things they're going to see and the people they're going to meet. I went the opposite and started describing how bad you were going to feel, how exhausted you were going to feel, how shocked you were going to feel. There's an above average chance you're going to cry. Guarantee you're going to want to leave early and go home at some point on day 31. So I went for all the negative things that you were going to experience, and the ads just exploded, just absolutely exploded, and the inquiries just poured in. And we ended up getting the cost of acquiring a customer on Facebook ads for products that were selling anywhere between $2,500 to $15,000. The cost of acquiring customers started going down to $50, $60 because we were doing the opposite from what every other ad was doing.
Classic example recently is the canned water company Liquid Death. Have you seen Liquid Death?
Oh.
Liquid Death, there's a size of a can, an aluminum can in the United States that's 40 ounces and associated with beer or with hard seltzer with alcohol. And what this water company did was basically look at the water market and say every single water company is trying to impersonate the clearest springs from Switzerland. They said, we're going to do the opposite. We're going to make it look like a can of beer so you can fit in at parties, at a frat party, at whatever rave party you are. But it's just water, which means you're just hydrating yourself. And they took this dark black can, gold rim, Gothic font, like you're in a German rave party, and wrote Liquid Death. It's just water.
So what that reminds me of, and this is not a design thing.
Liquid Death would have sponsored your tour
Yeah.
if they were around.
But what this reminds me of, and that although we're talking here about design and how critical it is to get these foundation right and design right and iterate all the time, here's a hard reality of life and tours and activities. This is the hard reality. You may be the operator, you may be the exception, you may be the 1% where you're designing and delivering the best tours in the world. Fortunately, that's not good enough. You have to be able to sell them. And the industry is so reliant on marketing rather than sales. So in the journey of building your tour operator, this foundation of design is fundamental and it's never going away. You're going to have to work at it, but it's not enough. You then have to be able to develop the business marketing, business development and sales tools. And these two combined of brilliant at design and brilliant at marketing and sales, you're going to have a really successful company. But do not ever believe just because you think you've got a fantastic tour because the customers tell you do, because they'll give you a 5-star review, because we have mostly 5-star reviews in this industry. Mitch has took thousands of tours, I probably took hundreds of tours. I've been in so many tours that go 5-star reviews and they're rubbish. So you have to understand that this market is about marketing and sales after you've got this design stuff really nailed as well. Business development, marketing, sales. And I'm saying 3 of them because they're all fundamentally different things that deserve a whole course and a whole learning aspect on their own.
Yeah. So, 5 stars, 5 stars, 5 stars. You get rewards of excellence for all of your 5 stars. You're justifiably proud of 1,000 5-star reviews. But what is it telling you about your tour? What it's telling you is that a traveler who is primed to want to love you, because you don't show up on vacation and say, I want to have a horrible time and I want to really, really make sure that this person earns their 5 stars. No, you're probably going to give it to them. I've given 5 stars to my Uber drivers that have yelled at me, and I still give them 5 stars because I kind of feel like, listen, they didn't kill me, so there you go, you get 5 stars. So first of all, I don't want to discredit tour operators. You guys are great, and I am one, and whatever else, but it's not that hard to get 5 stars. And if you're not getting 5 stars consistently...
The entry to the game. 5 stars are the entry
to the game, and that they're not... 5-star reviews are not all created equal. What are they saying? Is it saying this tour changed my life? If they went on a multi-day tour for 10 days with you, and it didn't come back with them saying this changed my life, then you have more work to do. Then you have more work moving up the value ladder to do with your tour design towards transformation. That's one. The other point that I think about is when you reach this point where you've got this fantastic tour, you're just trying to sell it. Our industry monetizes selling when it fits in the way that they can monetize it. So Google and Facebook want your money. All these different platforms want your money. And so all the marketing agencies, sorry, Chris, you're not here, so you can't defend yourself. All the marketing agencies, therefore, want to be paid to decipher how to spend your money doing all that marketing. But nobody can monetize the number one way, or usually what's seen as the top one or two ways that tours get sold, which is friends and family talk about it when they get home. It's word of mouth. You don't hear about it. You can't deliver golden solution for $1,000 a month to make sure that somebody's grandfather is going to go home and wax lyrical about you. And yet it's the majority of the way that tours get sold and recommended.
There's also, which is design and creative again, and we're moving a bit into the sales world here, design and creative. So now I was building multiple channels to feed my business, because I didn't just want tourists. Tourists were a minority of our business, multiple channels. I was wanting to build an education channel where we took lots of school kids, not on multi-date. We did that a few times, decided not for me. Taking kids away for multiple days is a horrible experience in my opinion.
That's my line of work.
But looking after kids for a day was fine. So I was like, how am I going to get schools to sign up with me to take the kids and give them excitement and scare them and make them fear, but also give them the environment, the outdoors, risk, all the stuff that adventure tourism does. So I started approaching schools, not selling my product, not selling my experience, by selling me. Because I left school at 15 without one qualification. So I started offering to speak to kids in school about how you can carve out a career even if you've not been successful in school. And then I went from one school to the next school, because they all speak in clusters in the schools. And I got to go to all of these different schools about just giving talks on how you're not a failure just because you didn't get your qualifications at school. You can go on and carve out a career. Obviously, that gave me connection with all the teachers, the head teacher, the different teachers. And then so now you're running these adventure trips. And funny enough, who became customers? So there's creative ways you can create channels into your business that are out with the way that everybody thinks it all has to be digitalized today. And we're not doing digital. It's hugely important and you have to master it. But creative design in sales and marketing is a bit like creative design in the actual design of the tour.
Yeah. Look elsewhere. I'm a student tour operator now. So my multi-day business is taking big groups of 8th graders around, and it's an extremely competitive market. And the way I looked elsewhere was by, again, selling my story, that we're the only company that I know of that was founded entirely by guides who have years and years and years of experience of knowing this. And we don't spend a dime on marketing, which means we know what student travel is like better than anybody else, we think. Because we have been there facing those children day in and day out over the years. And secondly, your money is going to go to making sure those kids come home transformed. It's not going to go to brochures. We're not going to do fancy junket trips for you as a teacher or whatever. I'm sorry, we just don't do that. The money goes to the kids' experience. And that's our pitch. So what are you and I doing in those cases? Storytelling. We're building connection with our clients through telling a story that makes us stand out. Is easy for them to go home and internalize and say, oh, that's the company that doesn't spend a dime on marketing, that was founded by guides. This gets back to the very beginning of what we said, which is we didn't just go and say these are our package prices. We didn't present our tours like a commodity, saying this is our price, this is our discount, these are our 5 stars, buy us, buy us, buy us, please, we're desperate. We stood out, we differentiated, we weren't afraid to turn people down if they're not for us, and we didn't just give information, we gave them emotion. That's storytelling. That's also...
And no, sticking with the education theme, we moved up the ladder in education to university students, so much older, still kids, but much older kids, 18, 19, 21. My route into that market was, what do kids of that age in the UK want?
Alcohol.
Yes, they drink a lot. So I would put free bars on in university towns.
I do that with my 14-year-olds.
With a presentation on about Nepal and Mongolia and Malaysia, wherever we were pitching that here's these wonderful places we can go as a group in the world and do these exotic, exciting things. But how do I get in? I get in by having a night for students that there's 3 beers here free each, and you get this bunch of students turn up, they drink all your beer, they spend all your money, but you convert that into a group that's going to go away with you in as well. So this all comes back to understanding who your customer is, who your customer persona is, and then designing around that persona. And often it is digital, but there are so many other ways you can design that is not digital that opens up all of this flood of business coming into your tour operation.